Welcome to The Dependence, a podcast of conversations about how our dependence on forces outside of ourselves can help or hinder our growth in our lives. My name is Jamie Adams, and I hope you enjoy your time here. So I like the top there, dude. I like
Thanks, man.
looking good, looking good. You becoming a marketer as you move out of your professional tennis career and into owning a business and running a business with your brand on it there.
Yeah, I wish somebody would have told me how how important that was to do while I was playing. It's almost like I had somebody in my close circle that was like a really good business mind that maybe should have sat down and been like, "Hey, dude, maybe you should, like capitalize on this while you're still playing in
Uh
front
huh.
of thousands of people."
Uh-huh.
But sometimes your circle comes through for you.
Yeah, well, I think there's plenty of times where I probably did give you some advice that you chose to not take. So, at some point, I just learned to shut up and let you do you. So,
Yeah, I mean, one
uh,
of the great assets and downfalls of all good athletes is the stubbornness, right? It's like what makes you good. And then
yeah,
also where sometimes you're like, can you just get out of your way for a second?
yeah, yeah. So so I know we're a few months into 2024. I guess we're almost halfway through, which is crazy. So you retired in January finally. Why? Why now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that some people view it as like an early retirement. When I look at it in terms of length of career for a professional athlete to have a 16, 17-year career almost was a really long career that, started when I was still in high school. I was kind of thrown right into the fire at a young age. Was very fortunate that the majority of that was injury free. But, at all times, that injury bug is always kind of looming for athletes, especially when you're playing seasons as long as tennis is. And for me, the last couple years, really post COVID, kind of got into that period where I couldn't stay into the tournament shape for more than 2, 3 months at a time. I would spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money trying to get myself ready to go for what I knew was the caliber of shape that I needed to be in order to get where I wanted to go. I didn't really want to get back to just like a minor league level. Like I kind of had the mindset where I wanted to be able to do it at the highest level again, or I wasn't going to do it. And once I felt like my body, after having like a number of setbacks, was like, okay, it's probably more likely than not that I'm not going to be able to, have a sustained run that it would need in order to get the ranking I needed to get to again. That's when I was like, okay, time to make a realistic decision.
How long did you contemplate it before you just pulled the trigger and said, "Hey, I'm done"? Like, was it fairly? I mean, I know you and I had talked about it at
Mhm.
different points the last couple of years as you were dealing with some injuries and stuff, but it was always. I kind of felt like during the conversation, it was, you know, you were just kind of having a bad day or a bad couple of
Mhm.
days, but when you really said, "Hey, I'm serious about this," was it a very short decision, or did you think about it for a while?
I thought about it for at least like 3 or 4 months after I played my last match before I initially made the retirement announcement. My last match I played was U.S. Open. That was in the mixed doubles there, but that was more to kind of go out on the terms of being like at the U.S. Open. That's kind of where every player, especially in the States, you envision yourself going out, kind of like at your
Yeah.
home slam. Before that, the last tournament I had played was probably in like July, a couple months before the U.S. Open. So between July and January, there was a good 6 month stretch where I was kind of, you know, making sure that that's the way that I wanted to go with it. Um, I think that it was kind of a feeling of like I knew that the further that I got away from the top form that I was in, the more difficult it was going to be for post career opportunities. I think that um, in every industry, it's like a what have you done lately sort of industry. You want to stay relevant, you want to stay fresh in people's minds, and I felt like um, the more years that I was spending as a guy who couldn't stay healthy, I think that it was becoming a little bit more and more removed from the days when I was playing at my highest level on television in front of a lot of people, where people knew my face, knew me in the tennis career. And so I think that you have that element also where it's like, okay, if I keep going, and I'm not able to get there, then there's that element of like, are people going to forget that I had, a 12, 13-year career where I played in, the Grand Slam main draws for such a long period of time.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll circle back to kind of towards the end, but what's your first memory of playing tennis?
First memory of playing tennis. Honestly, probably Shreveport Country Club, and I was less than 5 years old. And the funny thing is what I remember more so than actually hitting balls out there was sitting in the basket while my dad would be teaching lessons, and we
Yeah.
would be picking up balls and putting them on the corners of the basket so he could just grab them off. And I'm sure it happened in your lessons. It happened in other people's lessons. At that age, you're little enough to actually fit in one of those big 500 ball baskets. And so, you're sat in there while my dad was teaching, and it was some of those memories are funny. And then always like remembering my dad's old thing where anytime somebody was driving out of the parking lot, he thought it was the funniest thing to see if he could help the ball and get the car that was driving away in the distance. And that would just crack him up.
Yeah. I was a victim of many of those ball launchings that he did at cars on the
Oh
way
yeah.
out. Sometimes when it hits the car perfectly, like right on the hood or like the
Oh yeah.
window, and it makes this thud, it scares the ever living shit out of you. Is insane. I
Yeah, and then
forgot
that
about
like,
that, man.
did it leave a dent? Like, I mean, everyone has that moment, and I've done it before, like when someone's walking off the court and like you hit a ball at them, and that if it lands in their vicinity, it's going to scare them, which is kind of what you're going for. And then you'll hit one a little too accurate, and you're like, that might hit them in the head. That's not going to be good. that's not good. And so we all have like those occasional backfires, but yeah, some of those fun memories, they stick with you.
Yeah, you say around 5. I mean, obviously, I remember when you were like barely could walk.
Yeah.
You were 2 years old, and there was that big concrete wall at Shreveport Country Club back by
Mhm.
the hard courts, and you used to just like it started out. You would just have a racket was the size of you, and it was
Yeah.
like a small racket, but it was still like the size of you, and you would just the ball would be on the ground, like on the pavement, and you would just scrape the ball against the wall.
Yeah.
And then you graduated from that to like, just dropping the ball, and then you would hit it once against the wall, and you couldn't rally it. So it would just hit the wall, and you'd have
Take
to go
off.
chase it down.
Yeah.
And you would do that for hours. I mean, I just remember you doing that I remember times where your dad was like, and your dad, obviously, we both know he's kind of a tennis court workaholic. He's like on the court from the
Mhm.
beginning in the morning until late at night. But there would be times where your dad would be like, okay, Ryan, we gotta go. Come on, buddy. And you wouldn't want to leave. You would just want to
Yeah.
keep dropping the ball and hit it. It was
Yeah.
pretty fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, looking back at all those memories and like some of the personality traits, like I get asked this question all the time now in the coaching game. It's like trying to, deal with the athlete and the personalities. And it's funny how things coordinate, like, and correlate all the way through someone's life. Like a lot of the times that the kids that you see at 5, 6, 7 years old that are kind of stubborn like that, and whenever you're an adult and you see that type of thing, it's funny and you almost like get a kick out of it. And then
Yeah.
later on, you realize that like that same person who's like, you know, doesn't want to leave, doesn't want to stop until they get it right. And then like 20 years later on, you realize like that's the same person who, might be cramping in a fifth set and doesn't want to stop, doesn't want to throw in the towel. I always said like the guys I grew up with that might have been good players, the ones that were the softest in the 12 and unders, they were the softest as pros. Like you always knew that was kind of in them from the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. I would have put myself in the softer category in my short run of my college tennis playing career. So, tell me, what was the first kind of time where you remember thinking, I want to be a professional athlete? I want to be a professional tennis player. What's the earliest memory of that?
I don't remember a time where I was playing tennis that I didn't think that. Like I remember that, at a young age, if someone had told me that I wasn't going to be a pro, it was like, you are no longer a friend of me. Like you
Yeah.
were, you have just said the worst thing imaginable to me to
Yeah.
tell me that I couldn't do that. And I thought that, any of those things was kind of like motivation to go and do it. I mean, the quickest way to get me to try and do something was to pretty much tell me that I couldn't do it, which was that motivating factor. I think that like I'll show you that self-belief, and that's really something I think that, sports, business, everything, there's a million and one reasons why you shouldn't try and start something. And it might be, the more practical decision to not go for something that's such a lofty goal. But, I think that the most successful people have that, like, why not me? If somebody else can do it, why can't I sort of mentality. And yeah, maybe it is the practical decision for a lot of people, but if you believe that you have something great and special inside you, then, maybe that decision that could be practical might not be the best decision for you.
Yeah, yeah. I remember. I have the same recollection. I don't remember a time where that wasn't what you were completely
Mhm.
committed to doing. I mean, from the time that you could practically talk,
Yeah,
you were
yeah,
just,
yeah,
I'm gonna be a professional tennis player.
yeah, and
And
so many
that's,
things.
yeah. Go ahead, finish your thought.
So many things that come from that, because there's so many sacrifices that you start making at a young age that kind of are necessary in order to be really good at something, and
Yeah.
it's not for everybody. Like I have some kids now that I work with, and I have conversations with parents that are centered around like the normal high school flow of getting into the proms and the homecomings and all the things that you might have to miss because you have some tournament. And it's like, in the grand scheme of things, is missing this one event, going to be the end of the world? Probably not. But if you have that mentality that you're willing to make those sacrifices, that's what leads you to be the type of person that can really achieve something special, because you show that you're willing to put those sorts of things in front of, maybe what the immediate desire to do something is. And funny enough, whenever you have put all these sacrifices into something, it makes it that much more difficult to quit, because you're like, all right,
Mm.
now, like I gave up all this, and then for what? Now to ship it after I've already put in all this body of work. So believe it or not, it is, in my opinion, like necessary to make some sacrifices.
Yeah, yeah. And I can attest that your stubbornness on like the quickest way to get you to do something is tell you that you couldn't do it. That
Yeah.
applied to a lot of things in your life growing up. I remember whenever I used to tell you that you couldn't come to the movies with me if I had, a date in high school, and you would just go berserk.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Almost will your way into into the situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you put that idea in the head, right? It's like, this is not something you want to do, and so I'm like,
Yeah.
well, now it is actually.
Yeah, there were plenty of those moments. So
Yeah.
so when you moved, and I know you were really young, but I remember, when I finished playing tennis, I stopped playing tennis in college after my sophomore year, and I transferred to Louisiana Tech from Memphis. And I probably didn't play for about a year, and then I kind of got the bug to itch again to start hitting and playing. And I got in the habit where I would come over to Shreveport quite a bit and hit
Mhm.
with you. And you
Mhm.
were, so I'm 12 years older than you, so I was 22, you were 10 or so.
Mhm.
And I remember just how berserk you would still go, losing games to 21, even though, you were obviously going to be a great, way better than I ever dreamed of being, but you were
Yeah.
still only 10 years old at the same time, right? It's like
Yeah.
there was just a lack of like physical power that you had,
Mhm.
but you would just go berserk about losing. So, but I remember that was around the time that you guys decided to kind of move and go down to New Braunfels to Nukes. What
Yeah.
do you remember about that period of your life?
I think I just remember that at that stage in my career, I say career, but when you're 10 years old, is it a career yet, or is it,
In your mind,
at
it
that
was.
at that stage in your
In
life?
your mind, it was. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
in your
for
mind, it
sure.
was.
I just remember thinking that, my dad had kind of laid it out to me in a way that was like, we got to get you around some of these kids that you're playing against that are your age, because I was having to play you and Bill Borders and some other
Yeah.
members that had played either collegiately or, were higher level. But again, adults that I was having to play against. I didn't have juniors that were around my age that could push me. And I remember it just being like it was not even a conversation. That was a difficult sell for me. It was like, if we're going to an academy and this is the next step to get to where I want to go, it's a necessary move. And I thought that it was exciting to get around, the high level kids that were around my age. And I always looked at that like next step sort of mentality of, okay. And I did the same thing, honestly, to get to myself. Like I set these little goals. I remember being number one in the country in 12 and unders, but even before that, being 8 years old and playing the Little Mo Nationals, which is like the it's like the universally known in tennis is like the first time that they really start playing like high level international competitions against each other. And it starts at 8 and under, 9 and under, 10 and under, 11 and under, and then you get into 12s, which is where the USTA tournament starts. So a little bit of background on the tennis there, but I just remember being one of the best at the very first age that they started ranking
Yeah.
it. And my mentality was, as long as I don't get outworked and as long as I am willing to put in the sacrifice and believe in myself, that if I'm one of the best at 8, I'm not going to get past at 9. I'm not going to get past at 10. And as long as I'm working harder than the competition, I'll gain ground on the people who are ahead of me. I'm certainly not going to lose ground to the people that are below me. And so it's like these step-by-step parameters that were going to allow me to ultimately get, I think that I got there quicker than I think that most of us expected me to get there, at 14,
Yeah.
15 years old to already be there, which was, it definitely accelerated the process.
Yeah. I remember, I mean, I obviously took you to quite a few tournaments before you moved to Nukes in the summertime. We had our infamous shaved head incident.
Oh yeah.
I still think my favorite story though is when we were in I think it was Columbia, South Carolina, or maybe Augusta. I can't remember, somewhere, but you were like 8 or 9, but you were playing up in 12s, and I can't remember the kid you were playing. I know that you ended up beating Tennis Sandgren at some point in that tournament, but there was some kid you were playing, you were down like 6-1, 5-1, 40-15.
Yeah.
And your mom and I were there, and your dad was just calling both of us, like checking in on the score. And he was not happy that you were losing to this kid.
Yeah.
And, he was like, you tell him to call me as soon as he gets off the court. I want to talk to him as soon as he's off. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And then you come back from 40-15 down, double match point, and you win the game, and it's 5-2. And then you win the game, and it's 5-3. And your dad is like calling constantly. And this is before texting was a thing. It was just you had cell phones, and he's calling. So finally, like at 5-4, you have a changeover. So I answered the phone, and he's just going off at me immediately. Just like, I told you to have him call me. And I was like, damn it, man, he's still playing. It's 5-4. He's like, come back. And your dad immediately shifted. He goes, oh, well, okay, well, call me back. He got immediately happy. And then you end up coming back, winning that set. And then you like destroyed him in the third set. You just took the kid's soul. Like when he was up 40-15 double match point, and you come back and win the set. I don't think he won another game. It was like 6-1 maybe.
Yeah.
That was my favorite story as a junior.
Yeah, it was not a match I was supposed to be losing. I think I was playing a kid named Robert Hall, if I remember correctly.
That's right. How do you remember? Well, we're going to get into your memory in a minute, but yeah, that's exactly who it was. You're right.
Yeah. So I remember that story. I remember, it's like I said, it stays with you, like that resilience. And I think that, it's something that made me a really good professional. I had that resilience and that toughness, and it takes that. Whenever I talk to kids now, I'm like, you don't understand when you ship it, when you tank, when you throw it in, it makes it that much harder. That much easier to do it again. You do it once, and all of a sudden it's like your brain works like that. Like you build these patterns and these pathways of like habitual behavior that. I think I'm mentally tough, but if I talk to a Navy SEAL or somebody like that, who, MMA fighter, these guys are, doing these next level things that to them, it's normal. It's like, yeah, I mean, whatever, he broke my arm. Like, I'll be fine. It'll heal, like things that are just foreign in concept to us that, they find as like normal because of this like pattern of thinking. And I think it starts young. I think it does.
Yeah, I agree. So let's jump. You talked about, how no one kind of thought that you would get as good as you got as quickly as you got, right? So I remember in 2008, you're playing this tournament down in Houston, and my dad and I drove over, and I think you were 15. I think you were 15 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And you had a guy that he's top 100 or right around 100 in the world. And obviously, didn't really expect you to win the match. Just thought it was a cool thing that you were getting in, a wild card into this ATP event. And then you win the match. And for those people listening, Ryan, I think you and like Richard Gasquet and another guy that people probably heard of named Raphael Nadal,
Yeah.
like the youngest people to win an ATP match, like in, I don't know, a really long time. Right. So
Right.
what was that experience like? What do you remember about that?
Well, I got a wild card qualifying, which was
That's right. You did. You qualified. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I remember getting a wild card in qualifying, just kind of being one of the top juniors in the U.S. They give you these occasional, shots, and most of the time it's just to kind of get your feet wet and get used to the conditions and get acclimated to playing at the highest level. I don't think anyone sees a 15-year-old go in and expect to win. I mean, we just in the tennis circle, we just saw one of our top 15-year-olds, this kid Darwin Blanche. He got a wild card into Madrid and he won one game. It's like these guys like get in and they, even if they're top juniors, like it takes a while. And so I think that I got the qualies and people were like, "Whoa!" I mean, that wasn't an easy quality. Be a guy who was 150 in the world, 250 in the world, but it isn't qualifying, so it doesn't count as like a main draw win. But I remember like everyone saying like, "Oh, you came out of nowhere and you beat a guy top 100." I was like, well, I mean, the round before that, I beat a guy who was like 145 in the world. So, it's not like it was, a complete one-off. I'd gone through qualies and, had won matches against guys who were maybe just a little bit below that. But then I was starting against, top 100 guy. And I just remember thinking, I'm going to make a statement, like to me, like I wasn't afraid of it. I remember thinking like, you know, I don't know who this guy is. I don't know what the situation is, but man, this would be a huge win for me. So, again, why not me? Why not? Why can't I go out there and do it? Remember getting the win, pretty comfortable win actually in straight sets.
Yeah.
And then I was set to play James Blake the next round. At the time, he was like 8 in the world. And to be honest with you, I thought I was going to win that match. I remember. I was like, I mean, like I'm playing James now. James beat me down pretty good. But
wasn't there a little exchange? Didn't you guys have a little bit of an exchange, or he kind of give you a little bit of a ribbing in that match about something?
Yeah.
Did he pop you maybe? Like, did he hit a ball at you?
He pegged me in the shoulder. Yeah, he pegged me in the shoulder, and it was just kind of like a welcome to the tour. And he said something about that afterwards. I mean, you at the time you're not happy about it, but then I'm looking at it now and I'm like, I would have done the exact same thing.
Yeah, you definitely would have done the exact same thing. Yeah. You probably would have you probably have done something worse. Let's be honest.
Yeah, probably. But after the match, I remember he shook my hand, and I was annoyed that he popped me with a short forehand, and then he shook my hand. He was like, "Hey, dude, listen, it's gonna be a hell of a ride for you from here. Make sure you enjoy it." And I think that was like pretty cool for him to kind of give me like a little bit of perspective from someone who'd been out there already, a top American guy. And James, was right. It's the same thing I would tell a 15-year-old right now. It's going to be up and down, and you'll have some good wins, some tough tournaments, but you'll look back at it and think it was like the most enjoyable and thrilling ride of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's shift gears and kind of dig in a little deeper. Obviously you getting to where you got in tennis, and I definitely want to come back and talk about some of your other highlights and maybe even some lowlights, but that clearly took a decision from you and a lot of work and commitment and sacrifice from you. But I would think, I think we'd both agree that, it's impossible for anyone to get at a level that you got to in a career without, the help. And, again, going back to the theme of this particular podcast, some level of dependence on other people to help. So who are some of the people? I mean, I definitely want to get around talking about your dad, but that's an obvious one, but like, who are some other people that when you look back on your career, from early on to towards the end, like who are some of the people that come to mind that you really leaned into that helped you, that you were able to kind of depend on to help kind of escalate you and elevate you to the level that you ended up getting to?
Yeah, I mean, the first one out the gate was Andy Roddick. He was someone who I looked up to, number one in the world, last American winner major. And then in 2003 was when he won the major. And then around 2008, 2009, right after the Houston match, whenever I kind of started making headway, I was living in Texas and Andy was living in Austin, which was close. And, he saw it as an opportunity for, us to train together, him to kind of teach me some things, me to, kind of be under his mentorship a bit. And that really helped springboard me into more success on the tour because, you throw somebody in the ocean and you're going to find out quickly if they want to swim or not. And I think that was kind of like a product of me figuring out like how to play at the highest level. At the time, he was a top 5 player, and playing against a top 5 player every day in practice, you go play somebody who's 65 in the world after that, and you're getting free points that you weren't getting. You're getting opportunities. I remember playing him in practice and his serve, like I wasn't going to get opportunities to break him very often. If I did, it wasn't going to be that many. And then all of a sudden I play somebody who's 65 in the world and I'm like, shit, I'm getting a break chance left and right, whenever against Andy, that wasn't going to happen. So that really helped a lot, and I kind of, I actually texted him after I retired and said, hey, thanks for everything you did. You look back at some of those people. Another guy on tour who I looked up to a lot, Marty Fish, since, has become our Davis Cup captain, or he was for a few years. Marty was a guy who was very, very driven, but very kind of closed off at times in his career. And then as he got older and became more successful, and he was already extremely successful, more successful than I was, so more successful by his standards to get to the top 10 in the world and make the ATP Tour Finals, which is like our end of the year for the top 8
Yep.
players for each season. He then became this guy who, after Roddick retired, took on that like lead American role, and he helped me. And that was when a lot of stuff for me started to get difficult, because when Andy was still on tour, I was coming up and there was no, it was like up and up and up. And then Marty helped me a lot through, and even still does to this day, with, decisions, post-career decisions. I mean, I talked to him about my retirement decision. I talked to him about, he's a guy who I still talk to almost every day. And that's just a friendship that I've always really valued, because he's taken that like understanding of athlete, but also, human sort of, element of it, and has helped me blend in a lot of that. So those are the first two that come to mind when it comes to the actual players that I played with.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And then, your family, is clearly a tennis family. I mean, going all the way back from, your grandfather, and then your dad and aunts and uncles, like everybody is, in some way, shape, or form, at minimum, like a successful college tennis player,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you grew up training with your dad, kind of worked with your dad off and on.
Mm-hmm.
What was, what was that like? I mean, I know there's a lot to unpack there, because you guys, you are like the same person in a lot of ways. I've told you guys that you're, the entire time I've known you all, but I know that, man, that your dad is like one of the most influential people in my life ever. Right. I mean, like my mom still to this day, makes comments, you're so much like Pat, like it's, so, but just let's talk a little bit about, that dynamic and the influence and things that you had, that your dad had on you in,
Yeah.
Younger career all the way up to, present day, or when you got ready to retire.
Yeah, I mean, I look, I think that everybody looks back on things and they realize that there's positives and then there's negatives with everything that you look back on. And I think that overall, looking at where we came from and kind of the way that things were, started it where it did in Shreveport, in a town where, professional tennis, it's not like here in Florida where you see people
Yeah.
who are around that sort of high level training all the time. I mean, my dad played collegiate tennis at Ole Miss and Oklahoma State, and there's a lot of people who play collegiate tennis, but to have the coaching ability and the ability to kind of analyze and break the game down to where you teach the game at a level that even before he had his children, he had so many high level players like yourself and John Gray Pugh and Ginger Loudermilk and all these people who came out of a small town relative to, the big cities tennis wise, but like a small program at country club programs. And these aren't academies. These are, tennis and golf clubs,
Yep.
that people like, have a
Yeah,
true
more social by nature,
yeah, more
not a
social,
place
but
that people show up to become like an elite athlete.
that's right. That's right. And
Yeah.
you take a program like that, and then you all of a sudden start churning out, Division I athletes left and right, which is, I saw the numbers. I think on a commercial, it was like, 99.9 something 7% of athletes who play in high school never play, in college, yet let alone
Yeah.
Division I. You look at that, and you're like, all right, and then so you look at the program that he was building. I was fortunate to have someone who, like my dad, was able to teach me the game from a fundamental at a young age that was going to allow me to do it. Then the sacrifices from the travel, the financial side of it, the looking at the hours he put in on the court, to not just like feed the family, but to also, be able to allow us to travel. And I say us because my brother and sister played as well, to
Yeah.
travel around the world to pursue this dream. I think a lot of people would look and say that was crazy. I think a lot of people at the time did look at it and say that was crazy.
Yeah.
But and then kind of like we touched on early on, like the sacrifices eventually pay off, and you have to believe in yourself, and I think that I did, and I like high school time comes around, and your friends start dabbling into drinking and partying and all that stuff, and for me, I'm like, my parents have gone into $umpteen thousand of credit card debt to give me the opportunity to be in the situation I'm in now. Like, I'm not going to go and do stupid stuff like that. Stupid is relative. I think that
Yeah.
most high
Everybody
school
does
kids,
some stupid stuff, right?
everybody does some
Yeah.
stupid stuff.
Yeah.
I'll say more things that could potentially distract someone who was on the path of trying to be a professional athlete. I think I understood the magnitude of what my parents had sacrificed to get me into that position, and I felt a responsibility to do my best.
Yeah. 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 Is there anybody, if like, and I'm putting us both on the spot here, this is kind of a question for both of us though, but do you think that there's anybody on the planet that has spent as many hours on a tennis court as your dad has though, like teaching?
That no, probably not. To be honest with you, I mean,
I mean,
maybe somebody who's like 85, 90 years old that's been doing similar stuff, but for like 20
yeah.
more years than he has. But if you just look like, like by where he's at compared to where,
Uh-huh.
in the last 40 years,
Yeah.
probably not. I mean, he doesn't take a day off, whether he's sick, whether it's Christmas. I mean, we haven't had
It's
Christmas off where we didn't go from the Christmas morning to Christmas practice. And now, like, hell, I thought it was going to stop when I retired. And it's like now, like I'm last Christmas, I'm starting to coach, and I'm like, he's like, what are you doing later today? I'm like, oh, I'm going to get, do this. And he's like, oh, you're not working? I'm like, no, that's just you, actually. That's
yeah.
so,
Most of us choose to take a holiday like Christmas off.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
That's funny. That's funny. So I know that there's been times where, and when you were playing, where you and your dad really butted heads,
yeah.
um, as it related to, your training or match strategy or just kind of your coaching situation overall. Um, I'm sure that there are things that like you wish that he would have approached differently,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
that's like a conversation for another time. Um, and I'm interested in, how would you have approached maybe some of those things differently? Like, instead of maybe reacting certain ways that led to kind of the further butting of heads at times, like, are there things that you in hindsight maybe would have done differently or thought about differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you're young, you hear things from your parents that you disagree with, and you have that ultimate desire to try and change their mind and change their opinion on what they think about something. And rarely does that ever happen, if ever, that a kid or a child in the situation is going to change their parents' opinion about something. um, I think that it takes a lot of understanding, of to have anybody change your opinion about anything, but especially when it's someone that's your child. I think that that's tough. One of the things I got better with age was understanding that, like, I could get a opinion that I didn't necessarily agree with, and if I didn't agree with it, be able to let it go, dismiss it as like information that could have helped if I wanted it, and if I didn't agree with it, kind of filter and move along with it. So I think a lot of times, like when I'm coaching now, I'll tell kids like, look, if I say, 4 or 5 things and one of them sticks, like that's a good day. That's a day that like, okay, we found a little bit of something that helped this or helped that. That's part of coaching, trying to find like ways to like probe and pry and get the information through that you want to get through. But yeah, I mean, like you said, there's a number of things that you can dive into with a relationship that, as a coach, parent, father, son, two very stubborn personalities that are, convinced that they're right pretty much all the time. I think it's hard for me to, change my opinion.
You
But
think?
yeah, but again, like that's the type of mentality I think that I see with a lot of these guys that are really good. Like you have that stubbornness.
Sure.
Um, it's it's hard to be great without it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you jump on the scene early, you're 15. You had a lot of success at a pretty young age. Were you 17 when you lost in 5 to Benjamin Becker at the Open? Was that 17 years old, or how
So
old were
I
you
won
then?
that. I won that match against Benjamin Becker,
That's right. You won that match.
and then I lost to Del Potro the next round.
That's right.
I was
You
19
played Becker
there.
on the grandstand court, and then you
Yeah,
lost to Del Potro on the larger court the next day.
yeah. The match I lost was to Stakhovsky the year before, second round. I beat Lubicic first round. I
That's
lost to
right.
Sergei Stakhovsky 7-6 in the fifth. Had 3 match points. Um, you know, a match that later on in your life you realize like was an incredible moment. At the time, I was just thinking about like what was next and the ranking implications and all that stuff. But I think I handled it well. I think I remember, going to the press conference after the match, and people were asking if I felt like it was some huge missed opportunity, and I was just reflecting on the fact that I had some chances, and had to keep getting better. And I think that was a product of, like I said, having had a conversation with my coaches at the time that were in the locker room with me. Roddick talked to me before I went to press conference, and gave me a pep talk about the match, and so I had good positive reinforcement from some coaches at that time that were helping me.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to just hit the pause button and talk about something that I brought up briefly earlier, but that is your tennis memory.
Yeah.
So, like, and your dad has this too. You guys have this uncanny ability to remember like detail, like point by point details of matches.
Yeah.
So is that pretty much true of most of the matches that you play? Can you recall scores, like specific points in specific games? Or is it I mean, is that like just a thing? Is it just something that you've always been able to do?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for most matches of my career, I mean, when I look at my record and I go back and look at matches, I'll remember all the big tournaments from most of the years. When I see a record, like when I see the record and I see the person I played and where I played them, then the match, it comes back. Um, I would say when you're fully invested and engaged in something and it means that much to you, you don't forget it. I mean, I don't anyways. I remember most of these matches. There's a couple that maybe here and there, if it was a match that was a smaller event, or if I played against one particular person like 7 times, it's like, oh yeah, we did play there also. Like I
Yeah.
played for you.
Yeah.
So I would say large in part, yeah, I think I remember most of the matches I played.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. It's always been like fascinating to me. Okay. So one of my favorite experiences and times in your professional career was Memphis in 2017.
Hmm.
So, and what I remember about that week was a couple things. One, there was a tournament in Memphis, the Memphis Open, that is not around anymore. It's now kind of been replaced by the Dallas Open.
Hmm.
But always a cool thing because I played my short college career, my first 2 years of college, I played at Memphis
Hmm.
at the Racket Club where that tournament was. You and I grew up. Your dad used to take a group to watch that pro tournament from Shreveport when we were younger.
Yeah.
So I think we both got to experience that. And I remember I actually for whatever reason, had to go to Memphis that week for a meeting,
Yeah.
the week that you were playing a tournament. And, it was like a Tuesday, and you were playing Query that
Yeah.
night, I think. And my intention was just to go kind of watch that match. And then I was going to leave the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And then, next thing you know, you win. And then, you're kind of like, hey, you can't leave. Now that you're here, you got to
Yeah.
stick around. And you just kept winning, and then you
Yeah.
end up winning the tournament. So just what do you remember about that week in that tournament?
I won the Dallas tournament. That was at the time
Yep.
like the highest
The
level,
challenger.
the
Yep.
challenger. Right before
Yep.
that, I'd won 5 matches in a row there. I mean, that was definitely the best tennis I ever played in my career. That 2 week stretch, and then on into the next tournament. At that stage between the Dallas Open, the Memphis tournament, and then the next tournament, which was an even step level higher than the Memphis tournament, for my first few matches there, I ended up winning like 24 straight sets without dropping a set. And at that level, it's very difficult to do.
Yeah.
And I remember, feeling a lot of comfort, a lot of confidence there. I had in previous years in Memphis, Kei Nishikori had won that tournament like 4 times in a row, and I'd played him there once or twice before. I think definitely the year before I'd lost in 3 sets. And I remember just feeling like it was a very, indoor hard was definitely my best surface. When I look at the way that my record was, like the indoor hard courts was where I played my best tennis, and I knew that going in, and I felt like my serve was going to be, an asset there. Really cool to have so many friends and family there. A lot of people from Shreveport came up. A lot of family had flown in. Overall, it was just a really, really cool experience. And so, as far as like if I had to pick one tournament and that was going to be my only title at that level, without it being a Grand
Yeah.
Slam, that would have probably been it. So I was very happy with that.
Do you still have the guitar they gave you?
I do, yeah, I do. It's a
You
pretty
should learn
cool
to play that.
guitar.
You should
I
learn to
know.
play that.
I got my dog over here right now, like trying to jump in the screen. He's like,
Oh, there we go.
so I
There we
got
go.
to calm down. But yeah, now I'm
No, all good.
on top of other things. Now I'm a dog dad.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I've given you a hard time about how often you like to post on social media about that. So
We gotta play to our strengths. You gotta try and play to your strengths.
yeah, yeah. So let's talk about like getting into you're in your 20s.
Mm-hmm.
How if anything, like did your mentality about training and your kind of commitment to tennis, like did that start to shift at all as you kind of got older?
Yeah,
Um,
it's one thing that, me and my dad, talk about some of the things we butt heads about. We still butt heads about this. It's like, I think as you get older, your training starts to change a bit. You put less hours on the tennis court and more hours into the gym and in the recovery, because after you've hit so many balls over the course of so many years, you can't do anything if you're not healthy. And if you're not healthy out there, then you're not going to be able to play tournaments, and all the things that you can do are not going to come to fruition. So as I got older, focused a little bit more on gym, a little bit more on recovery. I think that did allow for me to have a 16, 17-year career, which I don't think that most people realize how long my career was. It was a very long career in terms of tennis, tennis time. If it was somebody who played collegiate tennis and they started at 23, as opposed to being, 14, 15 when I started, that's playing until they're 40 years old. So it had been a long time that I had, kind of understood that balance, and that's how things changed for me a bit. And we can start to dive into a little bit more of like the things I learned as opposed to things that I was kind of doing at a young age. But that would be a lot of it. A lot of it would be modern day nutrition, modern day medicine, how things have allowed people to extend their careers. All these great athletes are now playing longer at the higher levels than they ever have. Every sport across the board, you're seeing people, Justin Verlander winning the Cy Young at almost 40 years old. LeBron James, still one of the best players in the NBA, close to 40 years old. Tom Brady, still, top 5 quarterback up until 44 years old. All these careers and these deadline marks where people thought that was like no more, have since been like completely, the roof has been shattered.
yeah, yeah. What do you, if you could go back and do something different at that period of time where, um, where you were, you'd cracked top 40, top
Yeah.
50,
Yeah.
And if you could go back and change a couple of things that you think may have had an impact on you kind of staying in that level longer, what would those things be?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things I focus the most now on as a coach, and people hear me like stressing it, and they're like, "Wait, that's coming from you?" And I'm like, "You learn from your mistakes, you know." Like that's one of the things that. But I was a really good competitor, but you know, when you have a long-term plan and a long-term belief in a plan, then each individual day starts to feel a little bit less magnified because you have trust in the long-term longevity of what you're doing. And that minimizes stress and pressure on each day because you feel like if you go in, here's my task, this is controllable. If I'm playing in the second round of a tournament in Geneva and I lose, well, as long as I did X, Y, and Z, which is focusing on the long-term plan and these things are going to be in accordance with that, then there's nothing really for me to go completely into like all this pressure feeling. I was hyper focused and hyper stressed on each individual match I played, so I felt a lot of pressure whenever I was playing these matches. It would make me feel nervous. I would feel tight. I'd have some moments where I'd have break point opportunities later on in matches, and I would back off because I was feeling tight about not wanting to lose. If I could go back again, I would have definitely gone with the approach that was more of the play in accordance to what you think is going to be long term success without putting short term pressure on like the result needing to happen right now.
Mm.
And I see that amongst great athletes now. I wish that was my mentality more. It was one of those things that, again, talking to my dad, one of the things that made me such a tough competitor was that desire to not give a single inch and not give a single match away, which my dad was very good at instilling into me. I think that when I look back, I could have had that combined with long-term belief and approach, which probably, I say probably, which it definitely would have minimized the pressure of each match, and I think could have allowed me to keep momentum going.
Yeah. Beyond just kind of the tactical tennis related stuff though, would there be like things that you would do differently, like in terms of mentally, or habits that you may have practiced differently or tried to maybe develop differently? Um, your just kind of the non-tennis stuff, right? Like stuff
Yeah.
within your life, right, that influences, because everything that we do, like on the
Yeah.
side, kind of makes its way in impacting what we're doing professionally. Like, what about that side of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I worked really hard. I could have done a better job with my diet. I think that just growing up, I didn't understand the importance of nutrition and diet when I was a kid. Um,
Well, but you had such a good role model on that.
yeah, that's exactly exactly right. Um, so I was always in shape, but I was never like jacked because my diet
Yeah.
wasn't good, and I just genetically was not built like somebody who just so like my my best friend in the world, this guy Blake Davis, who I've known since we were 8 years old, would always jokingly say, I've never seen someone work harder to stay in mediocre shape. He would always give me like a little bit of jab, which he was joking, but I was fit, like I could play five
Yeah.
sets, but I definitely could have done a better job with the diet, could have done a little bit better job on that side of things. But again, you take the good and the bad. I didn't understand the importance of diet because it wasn't stressed to me at a young age. And so trying to change some of those pathways, you get to a point where you're like, I made it this far doing it this way. It's hard to make an adjustment when you've gotten so far doing it your way. And that's a tricky balance. How do I make adjustments? Sometimes you have trial and error. You adjust something that you had been doing, and you're like, oh shoot, that actually was working, and you got to go back to it. So always a experiment in that department.
Yeah. Yeah. What about, what I know early, later in life, I work with an executive coach off and on for like the last 10 years, primarily with this guy named Rory Clark, who, I introduced you to. I call him an executive coach. Like he's a little bit more of like a I hate using the word life coach because it's kind of a cliche, but he's kind of like a spiritual like life coach, and he's got a good framework for how to think through problems.
Yeah.
Would you have taken advantage of something like that earlier when you were playing in hindsight, or do you think that wouldn't have served you at that point in time?
Great question, because it's not just a blatant yes. I mean, somebody who hasn't been in that situation would always just say like 100% yes, humble yourself, take that. But that's not always the case in sports, because there's that level of like F you, I'm the best,
Mm,
that has to be done in order to be able to fire away in the biggest moments. And you have to have this like unwavering self-confidence. So you can't simultaneously be someone who's like, tell me what to do, help me, so there's like a balance. But I do think Rory, and that's why I care for Rory so much and value, I love him as a person, also value his guidance as a friend and a mentor, because he does a really good job of helping you understand the perspective. You come to a lot of realizations on your own without him just telling you exactly what to do, which I always thought was better if something kind of came from me. So, he'll give you like a little bit of like pointers and like reference points to help you navigate through whatever problem it is without just telling you, do this, do that, do this. And he'll jokingly just be like, I'm going to tell you this, and you're probably going to do that, because then you're going to find out your own way. And then you'll eventually realize that what I was saying, he's like, but you go ahead and go that way to get there if you want. He kind of
yeah.
has like a funny way of telling you. But I definitely think that someone like Rory in that space is very valuable. Whenever I talk to anyone about like getting help when it comes to the psychological part of the game, you don't want someone who makes you feel um, to go back to the theme of this, dependence is on the people who you rely on and you trust and that you believe will have your best interest at heart, even whenever you get a little bit confused. And I believe that it's that responsibility of those people to also remind the person why they are special and why they are great in their own right with the talent and the ability that they have. And I think
Mm,
that's what the best ones do in that sort of supportive cast. They remind you, hey, you might feel a little bit confused, but you do always seem to find a way, and that's why you are where you are, and it helps you with that confidence that you might need to pull the trigger on something you might be, having a little bit of second thought on.
yeah. Yeah. That's actually really well said. You talk about, there's the positive side of dependencies and being able to lean into people that you can trust, that have your back and they want what's best for you. And even if they give you opinions or advice that you may choose not to take, right? That their intention is to help.
Yeah.
But there are also, I think we also, well, I can at least speak for myself. I mean, I've developed dependencies on people and or things or habits,
Mhm.
right, that don't serve me, and that don't have a positive impact, right? They have a quite negative impact. So what would be some things that you've like found yourself over time, like, it could be things, it could be people. Obviously, I don't want you to use anybody's name that you feel uncomfortable with, but like things that like just you became a little dependent on, and you realize they didn't serve you. Like, what would be some of those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think that everybody has that tendency to want to have a drink at the end of the day whenever they feel like there's a lot of stress involved in something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, really simple. I mean, I say this because it's something that I've actively done in recent months. Like, I set up a home gym, bought a treadmill, got a little home gym set up, because if I work out before I go to work, I feel exponentially better about the day, no matter what is happening. So many people wake up feeling groggy. They spend all day looking forward to 5 o'clock so they can go home, they can have a drink, and then one drink turns into 4 drinks. They wake up feeling a little bit hungover. You get a little bit of reprieve for the time where you feel like a little bit loose after the drink. You turn
Yeah.
around, and usually it snowballs into less production over time. And I think that that routine was something I had as a player. Whenever I had something I was training for, I felt that responsibility to keep myself on schedule. Over the last couple of years, it was something I had to understand, that even if I wasn't training for something, that just being a healthy, fit individual helps you in all aspects of what you're trying to do. So, um, I think that that's very important, in life for people to remember, is that having like that healthy routine and that structure, it prepares you to be your best. Like you get up, you go for the run, you go for a little workout, whatever it is that makes you and your routine feel like you are prepared to take on that day in a positive light. Then you might not walk in the work door with that. Maybe your overall was a 2 out of 10 and it went from a 2 to a 5. Maybe it went from a 5 to a 7. Whatever it is, you're going to be in a better headspace than you were. And I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times I've done it myself. You work your butt off all week. You finally get the weekend. You have Friday night and Saturday night. You go out, have a bunch of drinks. All of a sudden, you wake up Sunday morning hungover. You feel like you got hit by a ton of bricks, and you got to get back to work on Monday. And you didn't even get your recovery. You didn't get your reprieve to,
Yeah.
to take in everything that you were. I think that there's a time and place for everything. There's definitely a time and place to go have fun and have your nights out with your friends and everything. But um, understanding how important that is, I think, is a really vital part of success for everybody. And that's one thing I had to learn post career.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. What about just, again, you found success as an athlete pretty young. I don't like telling you this because it goes to your head sometimes, although I don't think it does like it used to, but you're a good looking guy. Um,
I'll take it from you. I'll take it from anywhere I can get it these days.
yeah, yeah. But how did the kind of the professional athlete celebrity
Yeah.
kind of status, like how do you think that impacted you, when you were younger?
A lot, I mean, you have distractions and the opportunity to get into trouble whenever you want, and trouble being, with the opposite sex or the same sex, depending on what your preference is. It's not something you want to go too heavy into, but with any of the things that could potentially give you distractions, you can get distracted, and opportunity is there for it whenever you're in the limelight. Identifying, which people are there for you for the right reasons, which people there are there for you because they think that you might be able to provide something, who's trying to kind of hitch their wagon to you because they think that you might be on the way up, who's financially dependent on you. All these things are things that you have to understand at a young age, and that's where it's important to have a really good team around you, people who can kind of sift you through that. You always helped me a lot in that department whenever it was recognizing people around me that might be hanging around that weren't being a positive influence on everything. Especially in those periods of time with my dad where we were butting heads and my dad and I might have been on the wrong foot. I think that you saw an opportunity to like step in as an older brother and kind of, right the ship whenever you could. We're always trusted in that department, and you knew you could call me. It's funny because I think that a lot of people see how stubborn I am on the court and in certain areas and don't realize how actually approachable I am for the right people. I don't think that there's ever been a time that you called me and told me advice that I was like, hey, I don't want to hear it. There's been always a conscious effort with the right people to accept that information. And I think I got better at it as I got older. But when you're young, you have all of those opportunities, and you have to try and figure out, okay, which ones are there that are okay to get into? When is it okay to get into? And which ones are preventing me from furthering my goals? And that's I make it real simple. When people ask me about stuff, I'm like, is this or this is this not helping you get to where you want to go? And
Mm.
it is really that simple. And you see a lot of people dancing. Well, maybe if I do it here and I do it, hey, look, make a decision. Like is this now like helping you or hurting you to get you to where you want to go? And that's ultimately how you can make a lot of decisions in your life.
Yeah, that's really good. It's really good feedback. Rory talks about um, this, and I can't remember the words he uses, but there's kind of a stimulus, and there's the decision, and then there's this gap in between where you can really kind of think and ponder that question, right? Like,
Yeah,
which one of these decision opportunities is going to serve me, or potentially not serve me? I
yeah,
think the challenge that I always have in those scenarios is sometimes I just act too quick and I don't ask myself that question,
yeah,
right? I just kind of go with what the impulse is. I think
yeah.
I've gotten better about that the older I've gotten, but I still screw that up quite a bit, unfortunately. Um, Going back to the kind of the celebrity time, like how do you feel like if you had to score yourself on how you handled that kind of at its peak for you?
Mhm.
10 being I aced it, wouldn't change anything, a 0 being I completely failed. Like where would you put your score in that?
Probably around like a 6 or 7, probably a little bit above average. There were some things I was very good at, and there were some things that I wasn't very good at, but I think I was pretty good at most of the very important things.
Mm.
wasn't somebody who would show up hungover to practice. I wasn't somebody who would be, to this day, I never dabbled in drugs. I never did anything that was like, um, that sort of distraction. I think that
Yeah.
for me, I had my vices that were at times distracting and at times definitely got in the way, but always understood that like there were certain lines I wasn't going to cross, and so that's why I give myself like a 6 or a 7, because I think that I was had times where I would maybe go out and celebrate a win a little bit too much. I had a couple tournaments that were on the docket, and I thought, oh well, we're still 2-3 weeks out. I can go out a little bit here, and maybe those sorts of things I could have been a little bit more diligent with. But
Mm.
I think a 6 or a 7 is probably like a fair assessment number.
Okay. I'd score you a 6. I don't know if I'd go 7 on you on that one, but I'd
Yeah,
score you a solid 6, maybe 6.5.
you
I
don't have
think
to go better.
I think no, honestly, man, I always, I certainly thought that the older you got, the better you handled it, right? Like there was
Yeah.
like a period of time where I felt like you were probably, letting a little of it, a little bit more go to your head than I thought was good for you. But
Mhm.
I thought you snapped out of that pretty quickly. And candidly, I mean, I do think that all the stuff that you just described, I mean, you didn't do anything just outrageously
Yeah.
crazy or ridiculous, right? So I was always really proud of you for how you handled a lot of those things. I was certainly much more proud of than I was like going, what in the hell are you doing? So yeah, I think a 6.5. Maybe I can. No, I'm going to say 6.5. I'm not going to go 7.
Well,
Um,
I think we both kind of see it similar. I mean, we've had off the air conversations about some of this stuff too. That I think we both have a kind of similar opinion. I think that there was some things that worked against me that were challenges that like I said, from sometimes team members, family figures, family members that were at times difficult. I think that a lot of times um, there's a level of like defiance whenever you're a kid and you want to kind of show that you can just because you can. I definitely
mm,
had some of those moments toward my dad where I wanted to show him that I could do whatever I wanted and that there wasn't anything he could do about it. And that worked against me sometimes. I think that I look back and I think, well, shoot, maybe if he had been a little bit more like just supportive of me making a different coaching hire or that sort of thing, that I wouldn't have been as rebellious. But you look back and everybody can make a million justifications. Ultimately, it's on you to make good decisions, and you got to be, and that's the one thing that I would say. Be really, really selective about who you trust and who you let in those circles, because whenever you are in your toughest times, those are your trusted confidants that you have to be there with to make the right decisions.
yeah, no doubt, man. That's well said. Um, all right, last big tennis accomplishment. You're a Grand Slam champion. There's not a whole lot of people that can say that. You won the
Mhm.
French Open in doubles with Michael Venus.
Mhm.
What was that experience like?
That's crazy. I mean, Michael Venus, somebody I grew up with. I'd known him from a young age. I think that we decided to start playing together kind of on a whim. He played full time doubles and was having a rough year with the person he was playing with, and I was having a good singles year. So he called and asked if we could play some tournaments together. I said, of course. I looked forward to playing with them. It was going to be a fun opportunity. And 3 tournaments later, we won a major. And I was like, well, this worked out all right. We, kind of changed the course of his life. Since then, he's gone on to have an incredible, incredible doubles career. Being able to say I won a major has certainly helped in a lot of post career opportunities, as well as the pride and accomplishment of having done that. I think that, you know, at the time, you're always looking at like what's next. I mean, I look at the golf major that's going on right now on television in my background here, and all the guys that have won majors now, they're trying to win the PGA Championship, and they're trying to. You
Mm,
always look at what's next. When you reflect back and look back, you kind of realize that the weight that held was pretty significant. And I'm very grateful that I was able to accomplish some of those things. There's certain things I look back on when I think about all the things I could have accomplished, and I look back and I think, won a major, top player in singles for a long time. Um, Got to play the Olympics, Davis Cup on every
mm,
stage. I played in the toughest era of tennis against, Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, all at the biggest tournaments in the world. So it was a very successful career when I look back, and in perspective to act like I didn't achieve. Yeah, I do think that I could have done better if I had a little bit of perspective I had now. But when I look at it as a whole, I think that I can be really proud of a lot that I did, and I think that
Yeah.
that in part makes me feel I don't look back with the moments and think, you know, man, that was a missed opportunity, or that was there's some things that you go, oh, I could have done better there, but I
Yeah.
think that I have a lot of pride in the things that I pulled off.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of like all the slams, I mean, I never, and certainly when you were playing, I never really allowed you to be kind of a bearer of excuses
Mhm.
about things. But man, you just got screwed on Grand Slam draws more than anybody. That,
Oof.
I mean, just brutal. What do you know? Like, can you rattle off like some of the run of like first or second round like top players that you were getting thrown into these draws with, like at the slams?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I can tell you. I mean, when I was 20 years old and broke in the first year, and I was on my way to top 50, and then broke the top 50. I mean, my 2012 was, you know, Murray at the Australian Open,
That was
Djokovic,
first round. Yeah.
yeah, first round, Djokovic at
Yep.
Wimbledon, second round, Nadal at U.S. Open first round. Next year was Dimitrov at Wimbledon first round and U.S. Open first round with
Yep.
and for me, like at the time, like Memphis was like 15 in the world, and I was like, oh, I didn't get one of the top ones, so this is a good opportunity.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
played a number of top five players at all the majors in various different places. I played Djokovic, Wimbledon and Australian Open. I played Nadal, U.S. Open, Indian Wells. I played Federer, Indian Wells, Miami. These are big events where there's a lot of
Yeah.
points on the line. Uh,
Right.
I just was watching the Rome final today, where they're having a Master
Mm.
Series right now. Alexander Zverev won the title without having beaten a top 10 player the entire way through the tournament. And he had one win in the top 20, and that was against Taylor Fritz. And so he won one match against a top 20 player to win a Masters 1000 title.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that wasn't happening for us. We had, so many great players. So I don't know. I mean,
That was just that was a weird. I just remember thinking like he can't get a worse draw at
yeah,
this one
I
than he
mean,
got at the
look, if
last one.
if somebody was a baseball hitter and their career batting average was 285, but then
Yeah.
they had to face Justin Verlander, or one of these guys
Yeah.
significantly. I mean, they're batting 240, but that might be a good effort against him.
Right.
In that
Right. Right.
situation.
Right. Right.
Was definitely a very difficult time to play tennis, if you say the least. Now,
Yeah.
would I prefer to? I would rather my career high be 40, like it was in singles, and have the thing to say I played all these guys that
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
comparison, than have gotten to 20 or 25 and played in a different time. I think it's really cool to say, yeah, I played against Djokovic in these events. I think that even kids now who don't necessarily have the memory of watching me play, when I'm like, yeah, I play, I played these guys, and then they're like, oh shoot, you played against Nadal and Joe. Like all of a sudden now it like registers.
Yeah. 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 What was your favorite win?
Favorite win: U.S. Open second round against Raonic. He was coming off the Wimbledon final and
Yep.
was at the home major I had there at the U.S. Open. He was a top four seed, was coming off, and he was one of the title favorites behind Fed, Nadal, Djokovic. He was like right there as a title favorite. He'd just gone to the finals of Wimbledon, and I took him out there. And just remember that being in front of the home crowd was like incredible.
Yeah. That was awesome. What happened to that guy?
He had wrist surgery, two wrist surgeries. After
Oh.
two wrist surgeries, then they had to go back in and like try to clean up all the cartilage. And by the time he was done with all that, his wrist was just, you have that many surgeries on it, and he couldn't
Yeah.
get. I don't think he's
Got
officially
it.
retired, but I think that he's kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
figuring it out.
Couple other things, and I'll let you get back to your day. But I know we talked about you've got Christian and Madison, your brother and sister, who both played competitively. Christian's still out there playing a lot of doubles,
Mhm.
and is having a good year this year in the challengers too, and the
Yeah.
dubs. But What was that like? I mean, what's the dynamic of brother sister relationship? When you've got three very competitive people. I mean, obviously you and Christian different level than Madison, but
Mhm.
still competitive, and I still you still Harrisons. So there's
Yeah. Well, my sister played really high level college tennis, and she's the type of person. From an athletic ability standpoint, I think that she had the athletic ability to be a pro if she had made those sacrifices at a young age.
mm,
She didn't really want to be honest with you.
yeah,
Later on in her life, she started trying to catch up, but at a young age, the same way that my brother and I had been making those sacrifices from the time that we were very young, like I talked about earlier on. My sister, kind of an example of someone who when you try to pick it up later on, it can be difficult to flip that switch. Now she made enough sacrifices to achieve more than almost everybody because she made it so far in the collegiate ranks and was an excellent collegiate player. But to get to that top level professional tennis, it's kind of a sacrificing that happens early on. And my brother and I were pushing each other out there on the courts at a young age. We're constantly battling. Um, I'm so happy for my brother to see him knock on the door now, the top 100 in the world for the first time. I mean, if
yeah,
he can pull off a couple more wins, he's going to crack the top 100 for the first time in his career. Um, all the injuries that he's overcome, all the stuff that he's had to deal with setbacks wise, I think that that'll be a really awesome moment to see him whenever he starts to play. And I do think that he's going to be top 20, top 30 in the world in doubles minimum. I don't know after that. It's hard to say because at that point it starts becoming a lot about how can you stay healthy,
sure,
how all those things come into play. But I would be absolutely shocked if he didn't make it to the top of the ranks in doubles, and from there he'll have every opportunity once he gets there to keep on going, provided good health and everything stays on point. But very proud of him. He's a hard worker and a perseverer, and I think that it's going to be really a fun moment for me on this side of things to see him doing that well.
yeah. He's definitely a hard worker, man. I mean, the guy.
Yeah,
I mean, my God.
yeah,
Sometimes doesn't have an off button.
no,
Um,
uh,
yeah. So, and again, she didn't play tennis, but we would both. Well, first of all, we would both get in trouble if we didn't talk a little bit about your mom.
yeah,
But besides the fact of not getting in trouble, I mean, obviously, man, I saw because I grew up. Your parents were kind of like my second parents.
mm,
They were certainly like an either older brother, more like an aunt and uncle, I guess. But um, your mom just is a very like self-sacrificing
yeah,
lady, and she also like probably. I mean, she's like my mom in the sense that like they just fiercely love their kids.
yeah, yeah,
Like she would go like she would go strangle a lion if she felt like the lion was threatening you. Like she would like, and she probably would win. That's what's crazy.
yeah. In that
But
situation, she would. And if I strangled a lion, she would say it wasn't my fault. Well, let me emphasize a little bit more. If I strangled a lion, she'd say it wasn't my fault. And my brother, it definitely wasn't his fault. And if it was my sister, she just flat out didn't do it. Like it was.
yeah, you got accused of like killing a lot. No, no,
Yeah,
something have happened. He wouldn't have just done that. Like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah, you're right.
Madison,
Madison, yeah, just completely innocent.
she
She
wasn't
wasn't
there.
there. Yeah, yeah. All right,
uh,
but tell me a little bit about just the impact that your mom had as you were kind of growing up, and again didn't play tennis, but certainly kind of enabled and kind of helped you guys kind of clear the path on everything else. Like, what do you remember and appreciate about that?
she just was so selfless and so loving, and there's a lot of hard personalities in our family, a lot of really
Really,
hard personalities. Yeah,
really?
I would say so. Um, Always trying to keep the peace, getting put in the middle of every fight, having to be the mediator. I can only imagine the stress that's put on her. But always being that family first, loving and sacrificing, selfless. Really lived her life to take care of others. Incredible, incredible way of just like being there for you and being there for you whenever you needed something. My mom always was able to put like herself aside, and she didn't matter what the situation was. 4 o'clock in the morning, she'd drive you to the airport an hour and a half away. I'd never fly
Hmm.
home from a trip. where she wasn't there at the airport waiting. And then me being the kid that I was, if she was 5 minutes late, I'd be like, what the hell? It was, and that's just the things that you don't understand when you're a kid. But you look back and you're like, man, a lot of moms would have just said, get an Uber.
Yeah, they would.
Yeah,
They would definitely do that, but not Susie, not your mom.
no, definitely.
Um, so just a couple of like final thoughts and questions. So, um, like when you think about this kind of concept of dependence,
Hmm.
like what's the most positive area of your life that you feel like dependence on other people or on God or on a combination of those things? Like if you had to dwindle down like one or two kind of positive takeaways from this concept or theme of dependence, what would they be?
I think that, like we talked about earlier, the importance of understanding like what your foundation is, and the thing like having a purpose and um, having like your path of because nobody's going to go through life without struggle. You always are, and when you talk about dependence, to me, it's what are you dependent on whenever you have times of turmoil, times of confusion, whenever
Mm.
if somebody loses their job, if you lose a family member, if you have a tough breakup. I went through a divorce myself, extremely difficult thing to go through, and I think these are very human things that everyone goes through. And the dependence that you have is when you reached a point of saying, I don't have it in me, and I don't have the answers right now. I mean, I'm someone who lived my life um, thinking I had the answer for whatever the question was, and you inevitably reach a point where no matter how tough you think you are, you reach that point of like, man, where's my corner? And I think
Mm.
that it's important to have um, trusted dependence on people who that are going to remind you, like we talked about earlier, of who you are and ultimately how you became who you are and what's going to make you get there again. If you climb a mountain once, you can certainly climb it again. And you put those sorts of things in perspective, and you realize that life is a lot about dealing with obstacles and adversity, because I believe that everybody can find a reason to be unsuccessful that would be valid if you want it. If you want to find that reason that this is why I couldn't get there, this is why it's too tough for me. And I think that if you're really trying to achieve something, you need people who can, like we talked about in the beginning, um, give you that belief of why you yourself are different and better in whatever it is that you're going after.
Yep. Yep. What do you find the most kind of challenging aspect of dependence?
The most challenging aspects is being able to look at yourself sometimes and say, maybe I don't have the answers right now, and when
Mm.
to do that. You know,
You
you
feel like you've
everyone.
gotten better about that?
I think so, but I think that even still, I've still fallen to that like you talk about the impulse. Everyone has
Yep.
that, and like the positives of my impulse are that I'd run through a wall or fight a bear for the people I love, but then sometimes it can be hard headed and stubborn and tough to get through to. Um, I think that I think that it's hard because I believe that sort of protective and loving and fighting nature that a lot of like strong individual men have, it can be hard to find the balance of like when to back that off a little bit and how to
Hmm.
find that balance, and when to be when to be humble and when to have the humility. And I think that as I get older, I've been really focusing on how do I keep that level of strength that I love about myself, but while also having that humility of understanding, like, okay, this is a time where I need to look in the mirror and make some decisions. And who do I love? Who loves me? Who's going to tell me the truth? Who's going to tell me, what I need to hear? Um,
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just a hug. Sometimes it's an I love you. Sometimes it's for me the most important thing whenever I'm working my butt off. If I make a mistake and somebody who loves me, that sees all the hard work I do, then they don't point out the one thing that I might have made a mistake on because I was
Yeah.
trying to do my best and the best I could, and they say they appreciate me despite the fact that I might have made a mistake, along the way. That to me, is like everything, and I think that I try to do that for other people because I know the value that it holds for me. So if I see someone, make a mistake or however it is, and it's somebody that is dependent on me, I always try to reemphasize, I value and appreciate you for all of this, and I'm not going to focus on that
Yeah.
one
The
thing.
one, yeah.
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 So that's something I take a lot of pride in.
It's good advice. What's next for you? I know you've got, you've got the logo on, you get the Harrison Tennis Academy. But what do you see happening over the next, year, 5 years? Like, what's your plan?
Yeah, I mean, I have some personal goals that I want to achieve when it comes to, career path stuff. I'd like to get into some commentary and see if I could build up my commentary career.
Mm,
I think that it'd be really cool to be able to get into that analysis side of the game.
yeah.
But then from a personal side and like a, behind the scenes, like what I really want to work on is just all the lessons I learned of being on the tour for so long, both personally and professionally. I think that tennis and the impact on the way that I can have an impact on someone's life. Um, I have the ability to make an impact and a change in a positive way through this sport on a lot of people that I think that, through all the experiences I had, I really want to use that platform to try and outreach to as many people as I can. Um, any people who are trying, anybody who's trying to achieve, a collegiate dream, a professional dream, if they just want to improve or whatever it is, if they want to combine, sports with overall life experience and just how to, really become the best version of themselves. I think that through the sport that I played in for my whole life is the platform I have that I can do that, and so that's one of my biggest goals over the next several years.
Got it. When it comes to kind of coaching and training, do you gravitate kind of towards one group versus another? And what I mean by that, like, do you personally enjoy, kind of the junior development side, or do you enjoy working with professional players, or is it a pro and con to each, and it just kind of depends on the scenario?
Yeah, they have their pros and cons. I mean, I think that as a professional, you coach professionals a lot differently than you coach juniors. It really is completely different. There's a lot less information whenever you're coaching a professional that you go. The
Hmm.
juniors, you have a lot of feedback, a lot of constant corrections, a lot of trying to build the fundamentals. Professionals, it's a lot more on the mental side, a lot more of the um, be very specific with what you say and let that, kind of sit and resonate, and then, let them take that shape of that thought into however they can implement it, because a lot of times they already know so much about their own game. So I think I gravitate toward the professionals, and then the higher level juniors that are playing serious tennis and look forward to playing, high level collegiate tennis, or working their way from where they're at to eventually becoming collegiate players. I think that that's where I look forward to having the most impact. And then, being able to change someone's lives. Like whenever I have a kid who might have been off the map a little bit, but then they work hard, and then we do this work that gets them a big time scholarship or big time opportunity.
Mm.
I view that as like life changing work. And then through that, I would love to be able to, continue to grow the academy, grow the outreach through commentary and TV work wherever I can, and eventually start to tell even more details of my story that I think could help some young athletes that are coming into the professional world on maybe not make some of the mistakes I did, some of the things I did well that could help them, get on through the ranks of where they're at and to the next level even quicker. Would love to be able. I'm pretty much an open book, so I'd love to be able to tell that story that could potentially, help someone else down the road.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I appreciate you taking some time to talk about your story here with me today. This is going to make this the first official episode of my podcast. And, um, so I'm thankful that you took some time out, and I'm thankful for you and for our relationship. You've always been like a little brother to me. Um, and obviously, Christian's my godson, but you guys are both more like my little brothers. And I've always told you I'm proud. I've always been proud of you and proud for you, and that remains to be the case. So I'm excited to see the things that you're going to do in the future. I think you're going to make a lot of impact on a lot of people's lives in a positive way, man.
Well, I appreciate that a lot. We've always loved you, looked up to you like an older brother, and like I said on the show and on the podcast, you're one of those people in my circle. So I'm so happy to be here for the first episode. I know you're gonna do a great job with this. You have that talent and that knack for getting into these conversations in a respectful, but also still peeling back those layers and getting everything out. So I think it's gonna be great. And fired up to see where it goes from here. I'm glad we got on this.
Me too. We'll do it again, and I'll peel back more layers next time too. You gotta leave a little bit for part twos. But no, this has been awesome, man. It's been great spending some time together and talking about some old stories and bringing up some old memories too, man. So, look, thanks again for joining, and everybody check out. You can obviously just Google Ryan. You can find him on Instagram. I'll be sure to put all of his handles and stuff in the show notes so you can follow along with what he's up to. And man, get back to watching the golf tournament. Hopefully, you're working on your golf game a little bit as well.
For sure. Just remember, if you see any bad stories on Google, my mom said it wasn't me. Okay, just so you know.
That's right. All right, Ryan. Thanks, man.
All right. You're the man. Talk to you soon.